needs. But today is not about us. It's about the topic at hand. And today we are really zooming in to a very crucial topic, which is anticipatory action. But also, some of you may just be here because there was AI in the title of the session. So hopefully you'll find something interesting depending on what you are interested in. So very quickly, as an introduction, it is of no surprise to any of us that we talk quite a lot about the persistent but also persistently increasing gap between humanitarian needs and humanitarian financing, which has really thrown this idea of anticipatory action or acting early, thinking early, planning early. It's really thrown this idea into the spotlight. Today, we are really zooming in on a very important prerequisite of anticipatory action, which is risk analysis. How to do it jointly, how to use tools that are out there for us to make things a little bit easier for us, when we shouldn't perhaps use the tools, and when we should be using human intelligence instead, and what are the challenges and opportunities in really making sure that the risk analysis that we do is joint, is collaborative, is consistent, and is regular. And unpacking this today are our key four panelists. So I'll start from the left. We have Hélène, who is a senior analyst and project manager at Data Friendly Space. As an external guest, we have invited Hamish, who is a senior data scientist from IFRC. IFRC does not need an introduction, but Hamish, you can give it once it comes to you. We have Deria, who is the machine learning team lead at Data Friendly Space, and Pepe, who is a senior analyst, but also surge analysis lead at Data Friendly Space. So I'm going to, let these guys take it away, and hopefully it'll be an interactive session also at the end with plenty of questions and ideas. So Hélène, over to you.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for attending this session. We are very happy to present. Briefly, for the agenda of today, we are going to be going over the current state of risk analysis in humanitarian context for both of our organizations, so at Data Friendly Space and IFRC. And then we'll question ourselves on how can artificial intelligence help to address the challenges we face with risk analysis and anticipatory actions. So we'll really study the challenges that we face and the potential ideas and features that we can find through NLP and AI to address those challenges. So I'm going to give the floor first to Hamish, who's going to present his work at IFRC and use cases maybe.
Thank you very much. So thanks a lot for the pleasure to present to you all today. So I think I'll just quickly touch on just 2 points that I think are important to highlight. And then I'm going to ask you, you've got to raise your hands. You can help me out here. Not only am I the guy who is, arm in a cast, but I'm going to annoy you with some questions. So I think, thank you. The person who didn't get his laptop out, excellent. So I think it's important to define that anticipatory action really has 2 branches, formally seen as 2 branches, proactive and reactive. And let's give an example here. So in 2 days' time, you foresee that temperatures in your town are going to drop sub-zero. So it's quite natural to salt the roads, right, to prevent road accidents. Now, the reactive side of this is that you might, your local town governing body will have a trigger, right? They'll say, okay, if it's foreseen, forecast to fall below 2 degrees, then what we're going to do is set these things in motion, these wheels in motion so that the roads get salted, right? That's very reactive in the sense that, you saw something coming and you prepared for it. And that is still anticipatory action, obviously, early warnings, etc. But the proactive side is that you actually had the salt bins there in place, that everybody knew what their job integrating it into their work? Hold their hands up. Okay, so you really want direct solutions. Okay. And people who are just interested, not sure where it's going to lead. Okay, cool. Now, who's scared of the future of our society with AI? Okay. All right. Is all good? Okay, cool. Thank you very much for me harassing you and your hand raising. It's easier for you to raise your hand than it is for me. Okay, and then two final points, and then I'll move on. So my work specifically, so I'm a statistician, did a PhD in physics, and then I moved over to the sector. And so my work is on gathering external and internal databases that talk about historical, current, and forecasted hazards and their impacts. And by gathering all this data, there's a huge part of it was harmonization. How do you match these different databases? If one talks about a flood, is it the same definition as in another? If one talks about affected populations, is it the same as in another, etc.? I won't bore you with that. But then it's really the data science that goes on top of it. How do you deal with bias in your data? The fact that some countries just don't appear at all. There's hazards there. There've been countless hazards present, but they're just not recorded in the databases that you've got. How do you incorporate that? And so that's really been my personal work. And AI is going to be, machine learning specifically is going to be a huge part of that once we've really understood the basic principles of bias, etc. And then one final shout out, actually, good timing, Mel. But about anticipatory action, specifically the Anticipation Hub. There are some fantastic presentations that are going on over the next few days. I think it's really worth you seeing their good work. But yeah, it's all about basically that proactive and reactive elements. And I think it's a really good branch. So that's the Anticipation Hub is part of the Climate Centre, Red Cross Red Crescent Climate Centre. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hamish. So at Data Friendly Space, we started to focalize on risk analysis. We, with Jose and other analysts, we've had done risk analysis outside of DFS before, and notably with UNDRR, who are very strong with risk analysis. And we've discovered their whole methodology that we followed very thoroughly. And we decided to follow the same methodology that is publicly available if you want to see that guidance. For our own work. So I just want to go really quickly about through their approach and methodology, so to understand how we do risk analysis, so that's later on, we can also see the challenges that we faced in this methodology and how we can address those challenges. So the UNDRR methodology really is focalizing on how to integrate risk analysis into building decision making. So they follow 3 big steps: risk analysis, scenario planning, and response planning. So with DFS for now, we're really focusing on the 2 first one, risk analysis and scenario building. And as you may know, UNDRR has helped lots of countries to build their draft for HNO, Humanitarian Needs Overview, or CCA, Common Country Assessments, risks parts and sections. And they usually use the GIAF, Joint Intersectoral Analysis Framework, to do this risk analysis. So that's what we do also at DFS. First of all, we base our own analysis on comprehensive secondary data review, which is great because that's something we are really good with at the Data Friendly Space. If you know a bit of DFS, we've helped to build the DEEP back in 2015, and we are now the technical partner of the DEEP. So we use the DEEP to get access to data over the past years to understand both the current situation in a country. Once, of course, we know the scope of the risk analysis we want to do, which country, on how many years we want to look upon, next year, next 4 years, depending also on the exercise we want to do, or the partner we want to help with risk analysis. And then we use the DEEP to have an understanding of the context. Again, following the categories of the GIAF, so contextual analysis on political, economic, environmental, social, technological, demography, security, legal, and policy aspects. This really helps us understand where is the country at and what are going to be the factors and drivers of risks in the future. So once we've done that through the DEEP and other sources, of course, we draw a timeline of events, again, following the UNDR methodology. This timeline of events, whether in the past 20, 30 years, that's again the scope that you have to agree upon with your partners, helps us understand the past hazards, what's happened in the past, how it affected the population. And we also have a seasonal calendar that helps a lot with everything related to environmental hazards. Once we have this comprehensive SDR, we can move on to identifying risks. So how do we identify risks? Well, through this SDR, first of all, knowing the contextual background, but also using the very useful tools that our partners are publishing regularly. You can think about the Inform Index, the ACAPS risk analysis that are done very regularly in countries, the UNDR risks, country repositories of risks, and other sources, of course. Once we have identified all this list of risks, we have to categorize them by type of risks. So you have everything related to meteorological, geohazards, environmental, chemical, biological hazards, technological, societal, and extraterrestrial. That list is again based on UNDR approach that we followed for a systematic and robust approach. Once we have this list, we want to understand the likelihood of the risks and the potential impact. All of this is based mostly with DFS, because that's our expertise, on qualitative data, which is why having Hamish here is a really added value, as he's really strong on quantitative and we are really strong on qualitative. So likelihood assessments, we're going to try to understand what makes this risk more likely to happen, what makes this risk less likely to happen. Of course, it's never magical. Everybody who's been working in anticipatory action and risk analysis knows that we can be wrong. We try to be as likely to be right as possible. That's why we really need strong triangulation of data, first of all. Then for impact assessment, we're going to be based that on the vulnerability of populations. How vulnerable are they? In which geographical areas are they? And the vulnerable depending on geography, of course, and the capacities both of the government to respond, to mitigate the risks, and of aid responders. So based on that, based on this qualitative analysis, we can try to anticipate how much such a risk would impact the population, how the government and the responders could try to mitigate the risk. And also, we look back on past events, because past events teach us a lot on current events. And we can have a range of how many people have been affected in the past, and how much they've been affected. Have they been displaced? Have they been injured and such? And that helps us to give quantitative range of how many people could be affected again by such a risk that could have the similar magnitude of past risks. Again, it's not a perfect science, but we try to have as best as we can to help in anticipatory action. With that, we have final scores. So if you look at this slide, you will see something we've done for Sudan. I'm going to get back on that right now. So you have the likelihood score that we, based on a severity scale, that we try to assess the impact, and then a very short description of the risk. And then based on that, we can have a final score that helps us define which risk could be the more dangerous, kind of, with the biggest impact and biggest likelihood. Moving on, once we have this list of risks, what do we do? Well, we have to draw the assumptions and scenario. So assumptions, we have to know where these risks could be happening, occurring, in which time frame, which population groups would be most likely to be vulnerable and affected, and what would be the impacts. And once we have that, we can do the scenarios building. And scenarios building is, again, really up to your scope. So that can be just the most likely, that can be the best case scenario, the worst case scenario. And you can disaggregate, You can disaggregate per sector, your scenario. So what would be the impact of this risk per sector or intersectorally? Again, that's really up to the scope of your analysis. I would say the most important part for us in this whole approach that we follow at DFS is the validation of findings. We are very good with SDR, we're really good working remotely, but we do need the knowledge at the local level, otherwise we're really useless. So we always need to put those findings at the local level and ask during workshops, which is always the best way, to our local partners, country offices, whoever can be in those workshops. Okay, that's what we assessed. Are we wrong? Are we right? What can you bring? What inputs? What knowledge do you have that is not within the reports? Because this multidisciplinary approach is the only way to get risk analysis that is credible for use. We have the example of Sudan. DFS has been working for 6 months in partnership with IMAP on a project doing SDR and situation analysis. So we produced monthly situation analysis reports. And by end of, I think it was March, right? End of March, our team, analysis team went to Kenya and they held a workshop with IMAP, of course, but all the lots of local and country offices partners. We had the assessment analysis working group that was there. And during this workshop, we've been through all these risks that we addressed, that we didn't address, that we identified, sorry, really to discuss if the assessments of likelihood and impacts were what they are seeing on the ground or not. And that took place for a few days. And from then on, we were able to publish a report with the risks and scenario that are only focused on conflict, if I'm not mistaken. That was a choice from our team. So that's a very, very important step for us. But of course, this whole process that is very rigorous and very important to have risk analysis for anticipatory action takes a very long time. Further steps can be taken. You can do response analysis, response planning, which we do not do at DFS for now. And all of that helps to build this decision, to help with preventing action, strengthen capacities at the local level, prepare response strategies and such. So yeah, that was just a quick overview of our approach at DFS, and I'm going to give the mic back to Amish.
Okay. Cool. So, yeah, I'll switch this. Okay, so for the quantitative folk in the room, so I think one of the main points that I really want to highlight is bias. As I said before, the fact that some countries will be left out of the equation in certain databases, but actually bias there's so many elements to bias. That one example is a spatial bias. Another one is a temporal bias, and I'll give an example here. So let's say you have a database and you see that the number of floods that are occurring per year over the past 50 years is slowly increasing. What do we think? We think, okay, climate change, maybe a bit, population expansion, etc. But what happens if you suddenly plot on the same plot the number of earthquakes that are increasing? And you see that there's a steady increase as well in earthquakes, and you think, hold on, earthquakes are not linked to climate change. Earthquakes do not have an upward trend. They are pretty consistent, random throughout the whole of the existence of this planet. So you know that there's actually a bias there. And then when you dig deep, it actually turns out that the number of people who are working there over the years has been steadily increasing. How do you deal with that? And I think bias is so that's one that's temporal bias. It's also called accounting bias. There's another kind which is called accounting bias, sorry. And I won't bore you with all the other biases, or I'll just look incredibly boring, which I am, but never mind. But bias is extremely difficult to take care of. And if you just go and throw things in an AI model, then, rubbish in, rubbish out, as they always say. That does not mean that you cannot do anything. And I really want to insist on this. There often people say there's bias and therefore let it go. Stop it. We need expert, opinion everywhere. And it's like, of course we do, actually. I would prefer that. But when you don't have that, what do? Who do you rely on? You have to have some way of estimating risk and changes of risk in time, space, etc. So the second point I want to say is qualitative is hard to summarize and generalize, right? And especially if you're a decision maker, you might have
you might have that decision maker's ear for a whole 5 minutes. What do you want to tell them? What's your speech? What's your pitch? So it's really difficult to get all of that golden information condensed into a small message in these times of response. I mean, there are lots of other times. Could be, the proactive stage of anticipatory action. It doesn't have to be the reactive stage, but nonetheless, it's difficult. And this is where I think that the tool that's going to be presented in the next few slides, which I will not, I will not spoil, but I think it's very interesting, and I think it could be very interesting for the next point specifically. Equity. How do you integrate equity into risk models or risk assessments? Equity has many different branches. You have distributional equity, you have procedural equity, and you have contextual equity. And actually, there are many more forms of equity that have been defined. If you have someone who is local to the area that's leading the expertise rather than someone from very far away, then you're talking about some form of representation, at least. But equity is very difficult. And let me give you an example. So in Florida, let's say you have a hurricane that is coming over the next few days. It's expected to have landfall in the next few days. And you are planning evacuations, you're planning many different things, right? How can you learn from the past to do this? Well, if you had enough access to information, for example, for Hurricane Katrina, you would know that half of the deaths actually were people over the age of 75 from acute and chronic illnesses and some drowning as well. But actually, you would learn that what you need to put time into to minimize the deaths. And this is one metric. You could minimize displacement, deaths, buildings display damage, whatever. But let's say you just wanted to minimize deaths, then really you would be talking about make sure that healthcare, medical services do not cease. That you really are able to get, to access these elderly populations access, right? That is a form of equity and how you can integrate it. But it's really difficult to have that information. There isn't a database that I know of, if you know, please tell me, that talks about really fine, granular information about demographic groups and how they are disproportionately impacted during certain hazards. And also different hazards, you will actually have different reactions to different demographic groups. And another point here, and then I will move on to the final point. Actually, I don't have a final point after this, thank God. You'll have me shut up in a moment. But the final point I just wanted to say is talking about specific demographic groups and disproportionate impacts. I think we need to reframe certain things in the goal of equity. And the specific one I'm talking about is procedural equity, where people who are at the end of the chain get integrated much earlier on in the process. Now, let me give an example here. Let me start off with a statement. A wheelchair user is not a vulnerable person. If we all were wheelchair users, every human on this planet, that we would not be vulnerable people, because our physical infrastructure, it would be prepared for that, right? You would have ramps if there was, if you lived in a high-rise building, elevators would not cut out in times of need. We would find other solutions, right? And I think that it's really important that we turn that on its head, because these sorts of things are crucial things to learn for the future. If you do have hazards of different hazard types or whatever, you need to know this information, but you also have to have a good perspective of causally, that person, just because they are a wheelchair user, it doesn't mean that those were the consequences directly from that. It comes from the step beforehand, whereby actually you don't have things in place that would have prevented that from happening in the first place. So I think all of this, as you can see, I'm a quantitative person, clearly, and I think it's really impossible to have a depth, a broad, local-based database that's quantitative. We need something more, and this is why I think I will pass on to the tool for Gannett.
Thanks, Hamish. I'm afraid to say that before the tool, I'm going to be the pessimistic guy and also talk about a few challenges. But I'll try to introduce the tool in the best way. Many of the challenges have already been mentioned, and there's no there is no. I mean, it's clear that qualitative and quantitative integration is still a challenge, and for example, in my case, like in my past experience working, I found a lot of problems by giving names to certain risks or impacts, and at the very end, to those beneficiaries or to those local responders that need the funding to arrive, they say, I don't mind whether food insecurity it is or it's not a risk or it's an impact, and we're talking about secondary. It's just like we just needed to arrive. It was curious, for example, recently in Sudan, that it was decided to incorporate food insecurity as a risk, despite not following the methodology or the standards. But the country is already having a huge crisis, a food crisis, and it's gonna get worse. So it was necessary, let's say, to make that exception. Also, the difficulties to bring in that balance between qualitative and quantitative data to local levels again, and I will highlight this lack of localization in risk analysis as one of the main challenges that we as humanitarians are facing, and it's the difficulties of like expanding certain patterns or historical data, like like the chances of your specific village of being flooded this year. Sometimes it's a lottery. Yeah, your area is prone, but like it is really hard to to put those efforts on your village specifically, because there is a narrative that tells it, or there is a database that suggests that, or the opposite. So it's not easy to balance those quantitative qualitative facts. Another example, for example, when it comes to programming, like earthquake prone areas, and sometimes we prioritize because the rules and the methodology says that this is a really high risk of earthquake area, and in the meantime we have a huge let's say waterborne disease crisis, and just because of the methodology is sometimes a bit constraining. So it's a living science, I would say, and that's both part of the like, there is a lot of potential in that if we assume that the methodologies can be adapted and flexible, but it's also a barrier. Second one, and it's also related to localization, or the problems with localization, is how time consuming and we know time is money, so resource consuming that risk analysis is right now. So that makes it really hard for any local responder, but also beneficiaries or vulnerable residents, like even to assess risks. It takes too much time. So what does it lead to? When it leads to not be assessed on a continuous basis. So the risk analysis is usually it comes together with certain programming's key dates. So it's okay. So for this year's HPC, we need to do risk analysis at a national level. Then see you next year. There are plenty of indicators, plenty of data there, but they are not used as on a continuous manner as they should, or they could at least be. That makes it also really difficult for someone who's interested on assessing like the risk situation on a certain area, village, district, to engage on that process. What does that mean? What does it mean to not be localized, and what are the implications of that? Well, for example, quantifying risks again at really low level is not easy. Not quantifying risk leads to not programming or not funding certain areas. So it's problematic, and also like it doesn't allow for a validation of findings. And at the end, when we do risk analysis, or we do scenario building, like, assumptions are clear, and I love that. Actually, is one of the few fields on which assumptions are stated, and we know we're making that up. But if those findings are not validated, and that doesn't happen as it should on local levels, it really doesn't make a difference for those people either working or accessing to aid, especially in remote areas. And which usually are the most vulnerable, the most exposed. So the need of tools that allow for owning that analysis is what led us, to rethink how we were doing our work. Just to finalize, not that pessimistic, but to introduce a couple of tools we work with. We traditionally work with DEEP, which is a tool for qualitative secondary data review, and it covers the rigor of your review. So it's systematic, it's rigorous. So methodology is well covered. It's again resource consuming, and that prevents the localization that we've been talking about. So now we are going to introduce Ganet, which is a new tool that our colleague Deria will present now, and how a tool that initially was meant to be just a humanitarian or to be more broad. We thought that there is a clear use case on risk analysis. So I'll leave it now to Deria.
So yeah, Ganet is the new product developed by DFS. Currently, we are in the minimum viable product phase with minimum requirements. And as Pepe said, we are risk analysis is one of the use cases. So it is more a scale-up tool for humanitarians for emergency response and anticipatory action. Actually, Ganet is a tool, a generative AI-based tool to collect just structure, extract, analyze and visualize humanitarian information, and also it is highly scale up. And what we have, what is our vision with Ganet is that we have 3 features that we envision. One of them is collaborative knowledge hub. Actually, data is the crucial, data is the biggest part. Even when we are building the MVP, we worked a lot on structuring data. So collaborative knowledge hub is actually the structured data of humanitarian information from different resources, from relief web to news, UN news or any other information, and risk related data sources also can be ingested. And then we have several steps to structure them, and we create them in a database, structured database, ready for NLP models to use them, or machine learning models. Currently, we only have qualitative data, but also we are aiming to include also quantitative data and integrate them. So after having this structured database, we have the second feature, which is the personalized AI assistant. Actually, our tool is aimed for field humanitarian workers, to risk analysts, to just country office workers or international office clusters. So everyone, even without knowing without knowing what is AI, that they can ask any question, and then the system, actually the system retrieval system can retrieve the related information from the structured database and generate the response accordingly. And what we are aiming, especially for risk analysis, is to really retrieve the data needed for risk analysis. So currently with the MVP, we can extract the data so that the analysts can proceed with the calculating the scores, calculating the risks. So it is there. So what we can do is also identify trends and all these, for example, data hub, we can collect signals. For example, imagine there are narratives or events, conflict events, displacements, or all these natural disasters going on, and then you can see all of them updated every day to ready for you to monitor, and then you can make your analysis. And then also because we can input also local data, like local information, which is also secured for privacy. You can also localize risk analysis and contextualize your risk analysis. And like what is, for example, different from other platforms is it is up to date, as we said, so you can really monitor real time. You can really see maybe new features for machine learning that are impacting the events, impacting the upcoming events, I would say. And also this is by using the outcomes, we can provide also a narrative for historical data. And with the, like, as Pepe will show the demo, this is like transparent and explainable. So like I know like we are in the exploratory stage of AI. So we have still like trust issues towards AI, and we are still developing. So there should be a continuous feedback. But how to increase the trust and increase the accuracy, we created this like the retrieval system such that all the information in the answer, you can really trace back in the resources provided. So you can really check where the information comes from. So this is what currently we can do. So if we come to the third feature, which is in the upcoming phase, in the next phase, is the advanced analytics and alerting feature, where we will give more analysis based on this information or directly from your query, and also by the user-defined triggers or indicators, we can give alerts. So as we come, currently, okay, we can provide data. But for the next phases, what we aim is to provide advanced analytics and dashboards together with leveraging it for causal reasoning, because now there's no causal reasoning in it. It is just extracting information, what is inside the corpus. So what we mean with causal reasoning is to really connect the dots between events that are happening, that it is extracting, think about a kind of a knowledge graph. And then you can really trace back, okay, when an event happens, for example, in the historical time or current, okay, what it is leading to. What are the features, additional features maybe we can add into the predictive models. And also, currently, we don't have the local data ingestion, but we are also aiming for in the coming months, and also adding quantitative data and bias mitigation and monitoring, also as Hamish provided. So really to see how we can detect bias in there. Also, uncertainty in the reliability in the information. These are quite challenging, actually, the complicated things. So this will require also some research. And also we will integrate predictive capabilities, already available models, and then based on that alerting with the real-time information. And also if you want to use the data for your own for example, models, you can also export the data from there. And of course, as we said, everything is for local communities, and also the all the evaluation and also information, all these triggers also should come from local communities, and they should be the ones also using these tools as well. So building skills and capabilities and providing this feedback loop. So yeah, I will leave it to Pepe to show the demo of the MVP. So how we can use currently for the MVP.
Thank you, Daria. All right. Yeah, yeah, we need to drag it, right? Yeah.
Okay, I can.
All right, let's move to the, okay, so again, and we need to do again the, that disclaimer. So we need to understand that right now the platform contains only information from the 1st of March, okay, and it was never added as with any risk analysis intention. So it's just what we had for the generic use of Gannet. So right now it will always reply with whatever is already in the platform and not taking any quantitative data sets. So it's just based on text, which is just that initial state. But so I just said, okay, I'm a risk analyst working in Sudan, and then I need a list of the main risks that you identify, human or natural, if possible, disaggregated by states. And then we started having certain results. So we could now say, okay, I would like you to stick to the categorization, for example, given by UNDRR of what risks are. Okay, we haven't inputted yet that categorization, but that would just mean like it would just entail adding that requisite into it. So once we've got these few risks, then we give another instructions. So we'd say, and this again, it's based on something that has already been published and not it's not created in out of scratch. So could you try to assess the likelihood or the impact from 1 to 5, and then because that information was fun, it could do it. There was a justification, and well, it shows decent results for that first interaction with it, like we just did it today. Then we have, for example, do you then identify risk of famine? So we just move. Okay, so we move away. So okay, have you identified any risk of famine? And again, it needs to be explicit on the text. So that means that someone who, like from their home could actually do this analysis at any time. So it's giving us some results, and as you see, always we get the sources that the main sources, or those sources that Gannet considers as top on the hierarchy. So it's using many more sources, but it's using those that are considered the most relevant. So we're getting here some IPC level data. So we have food security data. We have like drivers, like displacement. So again, we're having like a narrative or like a broad understanding of those risks. Another interaction that we could have with Gannet would be, okay, and this is more simple. Okay, so what are the factors of increased vulnerability? I haven't defined vulnerability yet. So, but of each state in Sudan, and then it starts giving some answers. So okay, it's talking about Khartoum being densely populated, some other regions having inter-ethnic violence or like other, for example, other risks associated, for example, to agriculture or disruption of agriculture activities. So we see how with no investment on time on the platform, it's already giving someone. It also can provide, for example, a timeline of relevant events if we place the conditions for those events. So for example, the timeline we usually work with that goes back in time 20 years, we could get timeline of the most relevant events of the last 2 weeks that have to do, for example, with human risk, and then it would create it. So the potential is huge. We do believe that by aggregating the quantitative data sets and by creating certain logics in the tool, it would allow for anyone to at least prepare the field for risk analysis. At the end, is also like helping us on that documentation process that usually takes the most resources. So I think this would be the end of the presentation. I guess you might have questions, and we'll be happy to reply to them. So thank you. Any questions or any comments? Any of any kind, risk related or more technical? Please share.
Thanks, Nicholas from ACAPS. Thank you for the presentation and for showing Gannet real use case. So I'm trying to understand a little bit the design decision of how you've designed Gannett. And I was wondering, so if I'm an analyst and I'm asking a question to Gannett, how do I make sure, or how can I trust that those 5 sources that you're using represent the complete context to the question that I'm asking? So if I have, say, 10 documents that are actually relevant for Sudan and for risk analysis in Sudan, how do I make sure that those 10 sources are actually used for the generated answer? And how do I make sure that the actual generated answer is something that makes sense for me as an analyst for Sudan?
Yeah, just like you are right. Like actually, while also like we are testing in terms of accuracy and like whether it is like really like the understands the question first right and gives the answer right. So we really went into the corpus of the selected tools, because what we do is that like all these data is inside an embedding database, like, you know, like all the vectors and everything. So it just like selects like initially determined number of chunks and then re-ranks them based on priority. For example, for now it is like selecting like 15 chunks, and then you can really go through, although it gives 5, you can really show also that those 15 ranks. One way is to really like also show the bigger picture in the front end. And another one is actually, I'm lucky, I need to get it again. Yes, Control Tab. So we can also go and explore the data here. So we have also this functionality that we want to show the user whole like database, like where are the sources. So this is more like I would say for you to see, okay, for each country, what are the number of sources, okay, like which source it is coming from, and how many of them, and then the what is the type of the source. Like for example, we have a lot of relief web, because like the risk analysis is now like our use case, and this is more general than like MVP. For example, if you put MDOT and more like data inside its data for risk analysis, then we will see more different results. But also, when you go to the charts, you can really go for each country. For example, let's see, Sudan. Yes. You can see all the corpus here. So one way is really like you can see, okay, what are the, for each published date, for each source, what is the corpus? So you can also go through what is available inside the knowledge hub. But as a maybe like an improvement, also like just we are considering like in the RAG system, in this retrieval system, also to make a kind of a like a percentage, like also like not to miss out, like because there are new methodologies also in this retrieval system to really select, okay, like minimize the missing outs. So those will come in the further ones. But this is more explainability for the user to choose. But also like we have some just considerations in the model itself. Yeah, thanks to you.
I know we have another question at least in the room, but we'll take one online, which is more of a generic risk analysis question. So anyone is free to take it. What would be the update cycle for a risk assessment of an organization in your opinion? Should it be done on a yearly basis? Should it be linked to the decision-making cycles? Thanks. And that's from Ricardo. Who wants to take this? Pepe.
Okay, so I really think also I could say like, yeah, the more continuous the better, like, and then say okay quarterly, and that would be an answer that would be. But I think that the key thing here would be to actually rely more and more on those early warning indicators and those, you know, like those first narrative that indicates that things might escalate, or in the past when this happened. So let's think, for example, okay, based first on quantitative data. So historically, when that happened, and then we can see that, you know, on the media or on the narrative that we have here, there are starting to be signs of a certain risk that this could happen. So I would say more continuous and more and before the event happens. So we don't need to focus that much again on the possible impact and on the possible impact or the vulnerability of the populations, but actually on preventing those to happen. So more often, but I would say to anticipate those impacts. I don't know if Hamish, you want to add anything to that, or is that
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Anyone still in the room that wanted to ask? Yeah. Do you still have a question at the front? Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So my question was on the first topic. I forgot your name from IFRC. Hi, Mesh. On this aggregation of impact databases, so from past events, I'm very interested by it. Can you tell a little bit more on like what are the sources you are using to get information? And second, is this a process for IFRC to use internally, or you're publishing this somewhere, or other agencies can use it? Thank you.
Okay, thanks. What's your name and association?
Sorry, I'm Daniel from MapAction, working on spot reaction, risk, and data science. So
okay, thanks for the question. Yeah, so okay, first question was just tell me a bit more about the data. Okay, yeah, to be honest, it's the project. So I've been working on it just over almost a year and a half now, and the bulk, easily the bulk of the work is just this harmonization process, and it is really quite tricky. So we've gone through. We're using a really detailed hazard taxonomy created by UNDRR and the International Scientific Committee. And basically it's I mean, this is harsh to say, but it's quite unusable for pretty much anyone. There are so many categories and classifications, and there are multiple layers, etc. But basically, we adopt this so that it's the most likely that you're going to map one-to-one very well. For the impact and exposure, we had to create that ourselves. And so it was quite difficult to try and, for example, as I was using before, population exposure, it's quite difficult to make sure you've covered all the bases between different categories. Another part about the actual data itself is that a lot of the databases could be really rich, but they now kind of not used. So Desinventar was sort of UNDRR historically, this database, basically it's every government could join and basically then create their own database based on this template from UNDRR. Basically a lot of countries, especially in Asia Pacific, haven't been using it for over 20, 25 years. It does have rich information for 20 years. Now let's talk about MDAT, which I'm pretty sure most people would use. The time it takes between you having an actual update, like the final figure of, let's say, deaths or affected population, it's on average 13 months after the event has occurred. So there's a lot of issues that I'm more of a pessimist than an optimist in life. I know I'd rather be the other way around, but you know, like there's a lot of dealing with this sort of incongruence between different elements. And then what was the second question? It was about it's a publicly accessible database. There will be some levels where non-public, where the public cannot access it unless you're within the movement. But most of it, almost all of it, is public facing. So yes, good question. So we're trialing out our API at the moment. There's no way I'm going to be able to read it out and you'll remember it, but if you come up afterwards, I'll give you the link. But yeah, sure. Or I'll send you my email address and then, okay.
Thank you so much. We have many other questions online, but we will, to those of you that we're missing, we will generate a little FAQ, frequently asked questions, and we'll share this. But there's two last questions I'll take from online. I think these are both about Gannett as a tool, so they might be for you, Deria. One is, do you work with the data risk library to extract their data? And the second question is the large language model generating the risk scores in the demo, or is that done by analysts somehow offline? And if it is generating the risk scores, how reliable would you consider quantitative scores generated by predictive text? Should they be considered text data or quantitative data? Thanks for the great question.
So yeah, just currently, like our database is just the most selected ones, just because it is for MVP. But as per use cases, in order to customize the use of Gannett, we will add all different data sources, risk related. So as you said, data risk library will be also one of them. Which I also thank you for your suggestion, but it's not there yet. And for the second question, yes, it is a very good question. Actually, as we mentioned, currently it extracts information only. There is no analysis inside. So the RAG system, actually all the work is in Gannett is mostly done by the retrieval system, not the large language model. Large language model only generates the answer. That's the function of it. But for example, for this question of the scores of retrieving scores, for example, it is where was this one? For example, it is in one of the sources that it's identified. It is in one or multiple of these resources, so that it gets the answer, gets the query and finds the corpus and then matches it and provides it to you. So now only retrieval. But as a next steps, actually, we really want to just extend this, so that within given methodologies, okay, by extracting this information, how we can calculate it. But of course, there will be uncertainty depending on the data, because data can be conflicting, differentiating. So there should be some triangulation techniques, selection, and scoring techniques. So there is quite a road to really automate this process, but there should be always human involved, because still this is a feedback loop. So by getting evaluation, we improve. So I hope I answered well. So yeah.
We've run out of time, and I know we have other people already supposed to run to other sessions. But thank you so much to all our panelists and your questions. Catch Hamish on your way out to find out what IFRC is doing on risk analysis, and catch us in one of the booths to get a personalized Gannett demo. But also we are looking for ideas on what are the types of data that we should be including in our corpus. We are building the data pipeline as we go. We, for instance, recently added Sphere standards, the static documents into the corpus, so that we can also help Sphere track how their standards are used and implemented on the ground. So we'll be able to do some useful analysis there as well. So there was a question, I think, online whether academic papers can also be included. If they're credible, absolutely. So please do approach us online, LinkedIn, email, if you want to talk to us. But yeah, thank you so much, and yeah, see you soon. Thank you, guys.